Welcome back. It's Friday, but I got up 7 a.m. It's only 9:30. Let's read about this aircraft. So I have a long day left and I have to not spend any money in the next two whole months. So it's Friday. 2 weeks I get my YouTube money, but I have to save most of the money because my small saving is almost gone. So we have plenty of time reading. Let's read this old jet fighter today. And I will make a video in my language, Danish. After I finish reading, I was supposed to do in English too, but I have to do that later in the future. Well, I need to translate my Danish to English. Maybe some AI bot can do that in the future. They can auto-translate all my video to English.
North American F-86 Sabre. Sabre jet redirects here. For other uses, see Sabre jet, disambiguation. The North American F-86 Sabre, sometimes called the Sabre J, is a transonic jet fighter aircraft. Produced by North American Aviation, the Sabre is best known as the United States' first swept-wing fighter that could counter the swept-wing Soviet MiG-15 in high-speed dogfights in the skies of the Korean War, 1950-1953, fighting some of the earliest jet-to-jet battles in history. Considered one of the best and most important fighter aircraft in that war, the F-86 is also rated highly in comparison with fighters of other eras. Although it was developed in the late 1940s and was outdated by the end of the 1950s, the Sabre proved versatile and adaptable and continued as a frontline fighter in numerous air forces. Its success led to an extended production run of more than 7,800 aircraft between 1949 and 1956, in the United States, Japan, and Italy. In addition, 738 carrier-modified versions were purchased by the U.S. Navy as FJ2S and -3S. Variants were built in Canada and Australia. The Canadair Sabre added another 1,815 aircraft, and the significantly redesigned CAC Sabre, sometimes known as the Avon Sabre or CAC CA-27, had a production run of 112. The Sabre is by far the most produced Western jet fighter, with a total production of all variants at 9,860 units. Development, edit. North American Aviation had produced the propeller-powered P-51 Mustang in World War II, which saw combat against some of the first operational jet fighters. By late 1944, North American proposed its first jet fighter to the U.S. Navy, which became the FJ-1 Fury. It was an unexceptional transitional jet fighter that had a straight wing derived from the P-51. Initial proposals to meet a United States Army Air Forces, USAF, requirement for a medium-range, single-seat, high-altitude, jet-powered day escort fighter /fighter bomber were drafted in mid-1944. In early 1945, North American Aviation submitted 4 designs. The USAF selected one design over the others and granted North American a contract to build 3 examples of the XP-86, experimental pursuit. Deleting specific requirements from the FJ-1 Fury, coupled with other modifications, allowed the XP-86 to be lighter and considerably faster than the Fury, with an estimated top speed of 582 miles per hour, 937 kilometers per hour, versus the Fury's 547 miles per hour, 880 kilometers per hour. Despite the gain in speed, early studies revealed the XP-86 would have the same performance as its rivals, the XP-80 and XP-84. Because these rival designs were more advanced in their development stages, it was feared that the XP-86 would be cancelled. Crucially, the XP-86 was not able to meet the required top speed of 600 miles per hour, 970 kilometers per hour. North American had to quickly devise a radical change that could leapfrog its rivals. The F-86 was the first American aircraft to take advantage of flight research data seized from the German aerodynamicists at the end of World War II. These data showed that a thin, swept wing could greatly reduce drag and delay compressibility problems that had bedeviled fighters such as the Lockheed P-38 Lightning when approaching the speed of sound. By 1944, German engineers and designers had established the benefits of swept wings based on experimental designs dating back to 1940. A study of the data showed that a swept wing would solve their speed problem, while a slat on the wing's leading edge that extended at low speeds would enhance low-speed stability. Because development of the XP-86 had reached an advanced stage, the idea of changing the sweep of the wing was met with resistance from some senior North American staff. Despite stiff opposition, after good results were obtained in wind tunnel tests, the swept wing concept was eventually adopted. Performance requirements were met by incorporating a 35 degrees swept back wing, using modified NACA 4-digit airfoils, NACA 0009.564 at the root and NACA 0008.564 at the tip, with an automatic slat design based on that of the Messerschmitt Me 262 and an electrically adjustable stabilizer, another feature of the Me 2620. Many Sabres had the 6-3 wing, a fixed leading edge with a 6-inch extended cord at the root and a 3-inch extended cord at the tip, retrofitted after combat experience was gained in Korea. This modification changed the wing airfoils to the NACA 0009-64 modified configuration at the root and the NACA 0008.164 mod at the tip. The XP-86 prototype, which led to the F-86 Sabre, was rolled out on the 8th of August, 1947. The first flight occurred on the 1st of October, 1947 with George Welsh at the controls, flying from Muroc Dry Lake, now Edwards AFB, California. The United States Air Force's Strategic Air Command had F-86 Sabres in service from 1949 through 1950. The F-86s were assigned to the 22nd Bomb Wing, the 1st Fighter Wing, and the 1st Fighter Interceptor Wing. The F-86 was the primary U.S. air combat fighter during the Korean War, with significant numbers of the first 3 production models seeing combat. The F-86 Sabre was also produced under license by Canadair, Limited, as the Canadair Sabre. The final variant of the Canadian Sabre, the Mark VI, is generally rated as having the highest capabilities of any Sabre version. Breaking sound barrier and other records, edit. Jackie Cochran in the cockpit of the Canadair Sabre with Chuck Yeager. The F-86 has set its first official world speed record of 671 miles per hour, 1,080 kilometers per hour, on the 15th of September, 1948, at Muroc Dry Lake, flown by Major Richard L. Johnson, USAF. 5 years later, on the 18th of May, 1953, Jacqueline Cochran became the first woman to break the sound barrier, flying a one-off Canadian-built F-86 Sabre Mk3, alongside Chuck Yeager. Colonel K.K. Compton won the 1951 Bendix Air Race in an F-86 with an average speed of 553.76 miles per hour, 891.19 kilometers per hour. On the 2nd of February 1958, a team of Pakistan Air Force F-86 Sabres called Falcons set a world record at PAF Base Masrur by performing a loop while in a 16-aircraft diamond formation. The team was led by then Wing Commander Safar Marjad. Design, Edit. Overview, Edit. The F-86 was produced as both a fighter interceptor and fighter bomber. Several variants were introduced over its production life, with improvements and different armament implemented, see below. The XP-86 was fitted with a General Electric J35C3 jet engine that produced 4,000 lbf, 18 kN, of thrust. This engine was built by Graham's Chevrolet division until production was turned over to Allison. The General Electric J47 GE7 engine was used in the F-86A1, producing a thrust of 5,200 lbf, 23 kN, while the General Electric J73 GE3 engine of the F-86H produced 9,250 lbf, 41 kN, of thrust. The fighter bomber version, F-86H, could carry up to 2,000 pounds, 910 kilograms, of bombs, including an external fuel-type tank that could carry napalm. Unguided 2.75-inch, 70mm, rockets were used on some fighters on training missions, but 5-inch, 127mm, rockets were later carried on combat operations. The F-86 could also be fitted with a pair of external jettisonable jet fuel tanks, 4 on the F-86F beginning in 1953, that extended the range of the aircraft. Both the interceptor and fighter bomber versions carried 60.50 in, 12.7mm, M3 Browning machine guns with electrically boosted feed in the nose. Later versions of the F-86H carried 420mm, 0.79 in, cannon instead of machine guns. Firing at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute, the 0.50 in, 12.7mm, guns were harmonized to converge at 1,000 feet, 300 m, in front of the aircraft, using armor-piercing, AP, and armor-piercing incendiary, API, rounds, with one armor-piercing incendiary tracer, APIT, for every 5 AP or API rounds. The API rounds used during the Korean War contained magnesium, which were designed to ignite upon impact, but burned poorly above 35,000 feet, 11,000 m, as oxygen levels were insufficient to sustain combustion at that height. Initial planes were fitted with the Mark 18 manual ranging computing gun sight. The last 24 F-86A5 NAS and F-86S were equipped with the A1 cm gun sight and /APG-30 radar, which used radar to automatically compute a target's range, which later proved to be advantageous against MiG opponents over Korea. Flying characteristics, Edit. The transition to the Sabre's swept wings and jet engine saw many accidents and incidents, since even experienced pilots had to learn new handling techniques and flying characteristics. Early on in the jet age, some U.S. manufacturers instituted safety and transition programs where experienced test and production pilots toured operational fighter squadrons to provide instruction and demonstrations designed to lower the accident rate. As F-86 models continued to be upgraded, the learning process continued. Important design changes included switching from an elevator forward/stabilizer to an all-flying tail, discontinuation of leading-edge slats for a solid wing with a small forward-mounted wing fence, increased internal fuel capacity, increased engine power, and an internal missile bay, F-86D. While the solid leading edge and increased internal fuel capacity increased combat performance, they exacerbated a dangerous and often fatal handling characteristic. The nose was raised prematurely from the runway during takeoff. The danger of over-rotation is now a major area of instruction and concern for current F-86 pilots. The 1972 Sacramento Canadair Sabre accident resulting in 22 fatalities and 28 other casualties was a result of over-rotation on takeoff. Operational history, edit. Some of this section's listed sources may not be reliable. Please help improve this article by looking for better, more reliable sources. Unreliable citations may be challenged and removed. November 2011, learn how and when to remove this message. Korean War, edit. USAF North American F-86 Sabre fighters from the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing checker tails are readied for combat during the Korean War at Suwon Air Base. The F-86 entered service with the USAF in 1949. Joining the 1st Fighter Wing's 94th Fighter Squadron and became the primary air-to-air jet fighter used by the Americans in the Korean War. While earlier straight-winged jets such as the P-80 and F-84 initially achieved air victories, when the swept-wing MiG-15 was introduced in November 1950, it outperformed all UN-based aircraft. Introduction of the MiG-15 and comparisons, edit. In response, 3 squadrons of F-86s were rushed to the Far East in December. The MiG-15 was superior to early F-86 models in ceiling, firepower, acceleration, turning, rate of climb, and ability to zoom climb. The F-86 was marginally faster, and could outdive the MiGs. When the F-86F was introduced in 1953, the two aircraft became more closely matched, and by the end of the war, many American combat-experienced pilots were claiming a marginal superiority for the F-86F. The heavier firepower of the MiG, and many other contemporary fighters, was addressed by Project Gunval, which saw the combat testing of 7 F-86Fs each armed with 4 20mm T-160 cannons. Such F-86s were designated as F-86F2s. Despite being able to fire only 2 of the 4 20mm cannon at a time, the experiment was considered a success and signaled the end of the decades-long use of the Browning .50 caliber in the air-to-air role. Although the F-86 could be safely flown through Mach 1, the F-86ES all-moving tailplane greatly improved maneuverability at high speeds. The MiG-15 could not safely exceed Mach 0.92, an important disadvantage in near-sonic air combat. Far greater emphasis had been given to the training, aggressiveness, and experience of the F-86 pilots. American Sabre pilots were trained at Nellis, where the casualty rate of their training was so high. They were told, if you ever see the flag at full staff, take a picture. Despite rules of engagement to the contrary, F-86 units frequently initiated combat over MiG bases in the Matrian Sanctuary. In October 1951, the Soviets managed to recover a downed Sabre, and in their investigation of the type they concluded that the Sabre's advantage in combat was due to the APG-30 gun sight that facilitated accurate fire at longer ranges. Deployment of MiGs and Sabres, edit. The needs of combat operations balanced against the need to maintain an adequate force structure in Western Europe led to the conversion of the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing from the F-80 to the F-86 in December 1951. 2 fighter bomber wings, the 8th and 18th, converted to the F-86F in the spring of 1953. Number 2 Squadron, South African Air Force, SAF, also distinguished itself flying F-86s in Korea as part of the 18 FBW. The MiGs flown from bases in Machria by Chinese, North Korean, and Soviet VVS pilots were pitted against two squadrons of the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing forward based at K-14, Kimpo, Korea. The North Koreans and their allies periodically contested air superiority in MiG Alley, an area near the mouth of the Yalu River, the boundary between Korea and China, over which the most intense air-to-air combat took place. On the 17th of June, 1951, at 1:30, Suwon Air Base was bombed by two Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes, who each dropped a pair of fragmentation bombs. One scored a hit on the 802nd Engineer Aviation Battalion's motor pool, damaging some equipment, and two bombs burst on the flight line of the 335th Fighter Interceptor Squadron. One F-86 Sabre, Fu 334 /49 to 1334, was struck on the wing and began burning, eventually gutting the aircraft. Prompt action by personnel who moved aircraft away from the burning Sabre prevented further loss. 8 other Sabres were damaged in the brief attack, 4 seriously, and one F-86 pilot was among the wounded. The North Koreans subsequently credited Light La Woon-young with this attack. Evaluations of the success of the F-86, edit. By the end of hostilities, F-86 pilots were initially credited by American sources with shooting down 792 MiGs for a loss of only 78 Sabres in air-to-air combat, a victory ratio of 10-1. Of the 41 American pilots who earned the designation of ace during the Korean War, all but one flew the F-86 Sabre, the exception being a Navy Vought F-4U Corsair night fighter pilot. However, after the war, the USAF reviewed its figures in an investigation code-named Sabre Measure Charlie and downgraded the kill ratio of the North American F-86 Sabre against the Mikoyankovic MiG-15 by half, to 5-1. Internally, the USAF accepted that its pilots had actually downed about 200 MiGs. Soviet data records only 335 MiG-15s lost in Korea to all causes, including accidents, anti-aircraft fire, and ground attacks. Chinese claims of their losses amount to 224 MiG-15s in Korea. North Korean losses are not known, but according to North Korean defectors, their air force lost around 100 MiG-15s during the war. Thus, 659 MiG-15s are admitted as being lost, many of these to F-86 Sabres. The Soviets claimed to have downed over 600 Sabres, together with the Chinese claims, 211 F-86s shot down, although these cannot be reconciled with the number of Sabres recorded as lost by the US. Suggested reasons for the F-86's success include the fact that many of the American pilots were experienced World War II veterans, while the North Koreans and the Chinese lacked combat experience, but United Nations pilots suspected many of the MiG-15s were being flown by experienced Soviet pilots who also had combat experience in World War II. Former communist sources now acknowledge Soviet pilots initially flew the majority of MiG-15s that fought in Korea, but they also dispute that more MiG-15s than F-86s were shot down in air combat. Later in the war, North Korean and Chinese pilots increased their participation as combat flyers. The status of many claimed air-to-air victories in the Korean War has been increasingly debated as more data becomes available, showing that instances of overclaiming abounded on both sides. The research by Dorr, Lake and Thompson claimed an F-86 kill ratio closer to 2-1. A recent RAND report made reference to recent scholarship of F-86 v MiG-15 combat over Korea and concluded that the actual kill-loss ratio for the F-86 was 1.81 overall, and likely closer to 1.31 against MiGs flown by Soviet pilots. However, this ratio did not count the number of aircraft of other types, including the B-29, A-26, F-80, F-82, F-84 and Gloucester Meteor, shot down by MiG-15 pilots. Data matching with Soviet records suggests that U.S. pilots routinely attributed their own combat losses to landing accidents and other causes. According to official U.S. data, USAF Statistical Digest FI 1953, the USAF lost 224 F-86 fighters in Korea. Of these, 184 were lost in combat, 78 in air-to-air combat, 19 by anti-aircraft guns, 26 were unknown causes and 61 were other losses, and 66 in incidents. South African Air Force lost 6 F-86s in the war. This gives 256 confirmed F-86 losses during the Korean War. 1958 Taiwan Strait Crisis, edit. And RACAF F-86F on display. The Republic of China Air Force was an early recipient of surplus USAF Sabres. From December 1954 to June 1956, the ROC Air Force received 160 ex-USAF F-86 F-1A through F-86 F-30A fighters. By June 1958, the Republic of China on Taiwan had built up an impressive fighter force, with 320 F-86Fs and 7 F-86Fs having been delivered. Sabres and MiGs were shortly to battle each other in the skies of Asia once again in the Second Taiwan Strait Crisis. In August 1958, the Chinese Communists of the People's Republic of China attempted to force the nationalists off the islands of Quemoy and Matsu by shelling and blockade. RACAF F-86Fs flying combat air patrol over the islands found themselves confronted by People's Liberation Army Air Force MiG-15s and MiG-17s, and numerous dogfights resulted. During these battles, the RACAF Sabres introduced a new element into aerial warfare. Under a secret effort designated Operation Black Magic, the U.S. Navy had provided the ROC with the AIM-9 Sidewinder, its first infrared homing air-to-air missile, which was just entering service with the United States. A small team from VMF 323, a Marine FJ-4 Fury squadron with later assistance from China Lake and North American Aviation, initially modified 20 of the F-86 Sabres to carry a pair of sidewinders on underwing launch rails and instructed the ROC pilots in their use flying profiles with USAF F-100s simulating the MiG-17. The MiGs enjoyed an altitude advantage over the Sabres, as they had in Korea, and PLAF MiGs routinely cruised over the RACAF Sabres, only engaging when they had a favorable position. The Sidewinder took away that advantage and proved to be devastatingly effective against the MiGs. Pakistan Air Force, edit. In 1954, Pakistan started receiving the first of a total of 102 F-86F Sabres under the Mutual Defense Assistance Program. Many of these aircraft were F-86 F-35s from USAF stocks, but some were from the later F-86 F-14A production block, made specifically for export. Many of the F-35s were brought up to F-40 standards before they were delivered to Pakistan, but a few remained F-35s. The F-86 was operated by 9 Pakistan Air Force, PAF, squadrons at various times, numbers 5, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 26 squadrons. Moreover, in April 1959, a PAF F-86F flown by Flight Lieutenant Yunus of the No. 15 Squadron Cobras shot down an Indian Canberra spy plane over Rawalpindi, marking the first aerial victory for the Pakistan Air Force. In 1966, Pakistan acquired 90X Luftwaffe CL-13 Mk.6s via Iran due to post-war US sanctions. They were known as the F-86E in the PAF, not to be confused with the North American F-86E variants. The last of the Sabres were withdrawn from PAF service in 1980 and were replaced with the Shenyang F-6 fighters. In total, Pakistani pilots flew 320,185 hours in the Sabres, out of which about 4,500 hours were flown in wartime operations. They are now on display at PAF Museum and various cities around Pakistan. 1960-1961